Welcome back to Deep Dive Stoic. In today's deep dive, we're going to be looking at something pretty fundamental.
Yeah.
And that's this idea of training your mind to respond, not react.
Yeah.
So we've all been there.
Totally.
In a challenging situation.
Oh, yeah.
And maybe it was a work thing or a family thing or just life throwing a curveball, and maybe you kind of reacted impulsively in the moment.
Oh, yeah.
Didn't really think it through, or maybe you took a breath and chose a response that was more in line with your values.
Right.
Kind of your best self.
Exactly.
So that's what we're going to be exploring today.
I'm excited.
How to move from those knee-jerk reactions to more calm and centered responses.
Yeah. And it's amazing how much unnecessary stress and regret and just frustration comes from that reactive mode.
Yeah.
Right? And on the other hand, when you can really step into that space of choosing your response, there's so much potential to be more effective, more compassionate, more resilient.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's not just about you either.
Yeah.
It impacts how you interact with everyone around you.
Totally.
So our goal today is to kind of give you a toolkit, right?
Okay.
Blending those timeless Stoic principles with insights from modern psychology to help you pause, assess, and respond in a way that truly serves you.
I love that. So let's dive in.
Okay.
And, start with this core difference between reacting and responding.
Right.
I mean, it might seem like we're splitting hairs, but it really feels like there's this huge chasm between the two.
I think so.
Right.
Yeah. I mean, I think the Stoics were really onto something when they recognized that so much of what happens to us, like those external events, right, are outside our control.
Totally.
But our interpretation of those events and critically our response to them, that's within our power.
Okay.
So Stoicism, it really encourages us to put that focus on our reasoning, on our capacity for clear thought and the choices that we make. And it's about, a kind of mindful detachment.
Not in an uncaring sense,
Right.
but in this recognition that the external world, it doesn't have to dictate our inner state.
Yeah, I think it's easy for people to misunderstand that about Stoicism.
Totally.
Right.
It's not about becoming an unfeeling robot.
Right.
Right. It's not about suppressing your emotions or pretending they don't exist. It's more about creating that space for reflection before you act.
Okay.
Taking a beat to really examine those urges rationally.
Yeah.
Like, why am I feeling this way? What could happen if I just go with this initial impulse and then consciously guiding your actions in a way that aligns with your values and your long-term goals rather than just being swept away by the emotions of the moment?
Right. And it's amazing how much damage we can do when we react instead of respond.
Totally.
Right.
Think about sending an angry email in the heat of the moment.
Oh, yeah.
Versus taking a breath, considering the situation and responding calmly and constructively. Huge difference.
So much more effective.
Totally. So responding is really a much more considered and deliberate process.
Yeah. And, the Stoics really emphasized living in accordance with nature and reason. How does that principle connect to this idea of choosing response over reaction?
It's really at the heart of it.
Okay.
So living according to nature for the Stoics meant understanding the inherent order of the universe and recognizing our place within it.
Right.
And then living according to reason, that meant using our human capacity for rational thought to guide our actions. So when you respond, instead of reacting, you're actively engaging that rational part of yourself.
Okay.
You're taking the time to understand the situation, to apply logic and understanding, and to act in a way that's virtuous. Aligned with principles like fairness, wisdom, courage, self-control. And you acknowledge the emotions, but you don't let them be the sole driver of your behavior. You maintain that inner sense of peace and integrity regardless of what's happening externally.
And we live in this incredibly fast-paced world.
Oh, yeah.
Everyone's always connected.
Totally.
And I think that makes it even easier to just get swept away by those knee-jerk reactions.
Oh, absolutely.
Right.
I mean, just think about social media.
Yeah.
Right? How easy is it to just fire off a quick response?
Oh, totally.
To something you read, off an escalating conflict and misunderstanding with just a few taps on the screen.
Yeah, it can really damage relationships too.
For sure. And lead to decisions you regret.
Yeah.
Thoughtful responses, on the other hand, they cultivate respect. They foster understanding. They build empathy. They create space for more meaningful and constructive interactions.
Yeah, I love that.
And ultimately, they build resilience. So it's really fascinating how this ancient wisdom offers such a practical and effective framework for navigating the complexities of our modern world.
I agree. So let's get practical.
Okay.
How do we actually train our minds to shift from this reactive pattern to a more responsive one? What are some things we can actually start implementing in our own lives?
Well, both the Stoics and modern psychology offer some great tools for this.
Okay.
The first, and maybe most fundamental, is self-awareness.
Yeah.
Stoicism places a lot of emphasis on introspection, really understanding your own thoughts, your motivations, what triggers strong emotional responses in you.
Yeah.
You can't choose a reasoned response if you're not even aware that you're on the verge of reacting emotionally.
Right. It's like noticing those storm clouds gathering before the downpour.
Yeah. So once you have that awareness, the next step is the intentional pause.
Okay.
Marcus Aurelius, he wrote a lot about that space that exists between a stimulus and your response to it.
Okay.
That's where our power lies.
Yeah.
Our power to choose. And this pause doesn't have to be long. Right. It can be as simple as taking a few seconds, taking a deep breath, gathering your thoughts.
Okay.
It allows you to step back from those impulses and consider a response that's more aligned with your values and your reason.
So even just a few seconds can make a huge difference.
Absolutely. It's like hitting the reset button on that automatic reaction.
Love it.
And then another powerful technique is reframing your perspective.
Okay.
This involves choosing to look at a situation from a different angle.
Okay.
To consider alternative interpretations. This can reduce the emotional intensity of a situation.
Right.
And it can reveal alternative and maybe more constructive ways to engage with it.
So how might we actually do that in our own lives?
Sure. Let's say you receive some critical feedback on a project at work.
Okay.
Your first reaction might be to feel defensive, maybe even angry. But if you reframe that feedback, you could view it as an opportunity for growth.
Okay.
A chance to improve your skills.
Yeah.
And by changing that internal narrative, you directly influence your emotional response.
Right.
And open yourself up to more positive action.
I like that.
Yeah.
Now, what about focusing our energy on what we can control?
Right.
That's something the Stoics talk about a lot.
It is.
How does that help us respond more effectively?
So the Stoics, they really directed their energy towards their thoughts and actions.
Okay.
The things they could control.
Right.
And they cultivated an acceptance of external events that were ultimately beyond their control.
Okay.
So when you focus on what you can control, your effort, your attitude, your choices, and you accept the things you can't, it frees you from so much of the emotional turmoil that fuels reactive behavior.
Right.
So instead of getting caught up in frustration or anger about something outside your control, you can focus your energy on how you choose to respond with intention and integrity.
So being proactive.
Yeah.
Taking responsibility where we have agency, and then accepting with equanimity the things we can't change.
Exactly.
Yeah. Okay, so another thing the Stoics emphasized was consistent reflection and adjustment.
Yes.
So what can we learn from that?
They would do this daily self-examination, reviewing their actions and progress towards living a virtuous life.
Okay.
And we can do something very similar. Take a few moments at the end of each day to reflect on how you responded to different situations.
Okay.
Celebrate the times you chose a thoughtful action.
Right.
And learn from the times you maybe reacted impulsively. It's a process of self-assessment and adjustment that really cultivates that responsive mindset.
Okay, I like that. Now, earlier you mentioned mindfulness.
Yes.
How do mindfulness practices support this Stoic idea of responding over reacting?
So mindfulness and Stoicism, they come from different traditions, but they have this very aligned goal to cultivate a life lived with more awareness, intention, and presence. Mindfulness is about developing this deep, non-judgmental awareness of the present moment.
Okay.
And that really resonates with the Stoic emphasis on living fully in the now. The only time we can truly choose our responses, it's not just about relaxation. It's about training your attention. So when a trigger arises, your awareness is the first responder.
So it helps us become more aware of those impulses and sensations before they turn into those automatic reactions.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And there are some specific mindfulness practices that can be really helpful.
Okay.
Focused attention exercises like breath meditation are great for developing that ability to sustain your attention and redirect it back to the present moment.
Yeah.
So it's training your mental muscles for concentration and presence.
So just focusing on your breath can really help ground you.
It really can.
That's cool.
And then there's mindful observation.
Okay.
Bringing your full attention to the everyday activities in your life, like eating a meal, going for a walk, even washing the dishes.
Okay.
It's about being present, engaging all your senses, noticing the details. And body scan meditation is another great tool.
Okay.
You systematically scan through the different parts of your body, and it cultivates a deeper sense of body awareness and presence.
Yeah.
And this can help you release stored tensions and emotions.
Right.
So you're acknowledging your physical experiences without letting them overly influence your rational mind.
So it's about paying attention to the body's early warning system.
Exactly.
Right.
And finally, cultivating mindfulness in our interactions with others is so important. So being present when someone is speaking, listening attentively without judgment, it fosters deeper understanding and connection. And it supports that core Stoic value of empathy, recognizing that everyone's going through their own challenges and experiences. So it's not just about us, it's about how we engage with the world around us. So by embracing these mindfulness practices, you're equipping yourself to navigate life's challenges with more grace, wisdom, and composure.
I love that. So we've talked about the difference between reacting and responding. We've explored the Stoic perspective, and we've looked at some practical strategies and mindfulness practices. But how do we actually implement this in our day-to-day lives?
Yeah, it's one thing to understand these concepts. But it's another to put them into practice consistently.
Exactly.
So the goal here isn't just an intellectual understanding. It's about really enriching your daily life with that intention and rationality that the Stoics talk about. So establishing daily practices is key. And when you encounter a challenge, make that pause an intentional act. You know, ask yourself, what would a Stoic philosopher do in this situation? You're engaging your rational mind to evaluate the situation and identify the best course of action.
So creating that little space
where we can choose.
Exactly. And it's also about channeling your emotions productively. So acknowledge how you're feeling. Try to understand what triggered that emotion and then decide on the best course of action that aligns with your values and your goals.
So, for example, if you get a frustrating email, instead of firing off a response right away, maybe step away from the computer. Take a walk. Clear your head. And then come back to it with a fresh perspective.
Huge difference. And each time you do that, you're reinforcing that positive pattern. Building resilience and inner peace.
I love that.
So try to integrate this into your daily routine. Start each day with some reflection. Setting an intention to respond thoughtfully. Maybe try journaling. Reflecting on situations and your responses. Celebrate your successes.
And learn from the moments where you might have slipped up. Embrace that mindset of continuous learning. You know, every day is a chance to practice and get better at this.
It's a journey.
It is, not a destination.
Exactly. It's about living with intentionality, aligning your actions with your values. And in doing so, you benefit yourself. And you contribute to a more reasoned and compassionate world.
I love that. So as we wrap up, what are some key takeaways for our listeners?
Well, it really comes down to this idea of cultivating a deeper engagement with yourself and the world. Choosing to navigate life's challenges. Not with those impulsive reactions. But with grace, equanimity, and rational thought. And remember those core Stoic principles. Focus on what you can control. Act with reason. And strive to live virtuously. Every moment is an opportunity to practice choosing response over reaction.
Embodying those virtues of wisdom courage, justice, and temperance, and these consistent, thoughtful responses, they'll not only improve your well-being, they'll also impact those around you.
Totally.
It's an ongoing journey of self-reflection and growth.
Right.
And you know, what's really interesting to think about is what would happen if we all embraced this idea of conscious response, you know, on a societal level? How much more understanding and less conflict could there be?
That's a really powerful thought.
Yeah.
Well, this has been a fantastic deep dive. Thank you all for being a part of this podcast with us. If this episode helped you slow down and reflect, support Deep Dive Stoic, like, subscribe, and pass it on. See you next time.